At exactly 11:38, the USS Cole DDG-67 was making a routine northbound transit through the Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles of saltwater through which 20% of the world's traded oil moves every single day, with Iran on one side and the open Indian Ocean on the other, along with every global economy that runs on petroleum. The Iranians had been watching that specific patch of water for 40 years. They knew every radar shadow, every thermal layer, every island that could hide a boat until the last possible second before weapons range. They had mapped the currents, run the timing calculations, and identified exactly where a destroyer has to reduce speed to navigate the shipping lane separation scheme. They had rehearsed this specific geometry in at least 11 documented IRGC naval exercises since 2019. That morning, someone in Tehran decided the rehearsals were done. 24 contacts appeared simultaneously on Cole's AN/SPY-1D radar, not filtering in one by one, but all at once, launching from 3 separate island positions and converging from angles specifically calculated to split a single ship's fields of fire. 18 Zolfaghar-class fast attack craft screamed south at 52 knots, each one 17 meters of fiberglass and aluminum carrying 2 Nazar, 1 anti-ship missiles with 150 kilogram semi-armor piercing warheads, and a crew of 3 willing to die for a regime that had run out of cheaper options. Supporting them were 6 Ashura-class intercept boats moving at 90 knots. Their job, not missiles, but chaos, get close enough to the destroyer's hull that its own defensive systems had to hesitate. The IRGC commander, watching from the coastal observation post, had done his math. 24 contacts from 3 directions simultaneously. More problems than any single warship could track, engage, and survive. And this wasn't a theory pulled from a whiteboard. Iranian doctrine had been built and refined specifically around this geometry for decades. Stress-tested in war games, validated by American military analysts who had written papers acknowledging that swarm saturation in confined littoral waters was a genuine vulnerability for surface combatants. The Millennium Challenge war game of 2002 had already demonstrated what a thinking adversary could do to a U.S. naval force in the Persian Gulf, using exactly this kind of asymmetric pressure. The IRGC had read those after-action reports. They believed the math worked. What it was missing was the variable that changed everything, because the USS Cole wasn't alone. By 11:38, the tactical action officer had already called general quarters before the last Iranian boat cleared its launch bay, which is exactly how fast the Aegis combat system processes threat data. The AN/SPY-1D sits at the center of that system, 4 fixed phased array radar faces, each a flat panel of thousands of individual transmit-receive elements that steer radar beams electronically rather than mechanically, meaning no rotating dish, no dead zones between sweeps, and no half-second gap where something slips through undetected. The system generates a complete 360-degree tactical picture continuously and not in discrete sweeps, tracking over 100 airborne and surface contacts simultaneously, building velocity vectors on all of them in real time, and assigning weapons to targets the same second they're classified as threats. The entire process from detection to weapons assignment to firing authorization takes seconds rather than minutes, because the Aegis system is less a weapon than an argument, and the argument is this. If you think you can overwhelm a modern destroyer by throwing more problems at it than it can solve, you're assuming it solves problems the way a person does, one at a time, getting slower under pressure and making mistakes when the list gets long. Aegis doesn't get slower. It doesn't make mistakes when contacts multiply, and it gets more efficient with every new contact, because each one is just another data point in a system that processes thousands of them simultaneously, without fatigue, anxiety, or hesitation. The 24 Iranian contacts didn't overwhelm it. They gave it something to do on a quiet morning in a narrow strait. What happened next unfolded in 4 overlapping layers, each one starting before the previous one finished. The first layer was already airborne, because 2 MH-60R Romeo Seahawk helicopters had been flying a standard anti-surface screen 35 miles ahead of Cole since the ship entered the strait. And this is standard operating procedure, not a reaction to the attack. Every U.S. destroyer transiting the strait launches its Romeos before the hull clears the territorial sea boundary, meaning the helicopters are up before anything happens, watching before there is anything to watch. already loitering at altitude with weapons hot, and targeting solutions feeding back to the ship in real time. The Iranians launched into a net that was already set. The Romeo doesn't look like a combat aircraft. 64 feet of matte gray fuselage, crew of 3, looks like it belongs covering traffic reports over a highway, but that impression ends the moment the operator activates the AN/APS-153 multi-mode radar, which paints every surface contact within 30 miles in photographic detail and authorizes the Hellfire firing solution it's been computing for the last 4 minutes. Each MH-60R carries up to 8 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, laser-guided with a range of 6.8 miles from low altitude, and the Hellfire's warhead was originally designed to defeat armored vehicles. What that means against an open-topped fiberglass speedboat traveling at 52 knots is that the warhead doesn't explode on the surface of the hull. It explodes through it, and hydraulics, fuel, crew, and missile tubes all cease to exist in the configuration they started the morning. The boats carrying the Nasr 1 missiles don't just get sunk, they get detonated, with their own ordnance cooking off in the fireball. By 11:41, the first Hellfire impacts had destroyed 8 Zolfaghar-class craft in 4 minutes of methodical engagement, burning fuel, spreading across the strait's surface and leaving 24 IRGC sailors killed and 5 more boats disabled and dead in the water. The Romeo crews had eliminated 1/3 of the attacking force before a single Nasr 1 had achieved guidance lock on the destroyer, doing it from altitudes the Iranian boats couldn't effectively reach. The DSKM 12.7mm heavy machine guns on Zolfaghar hulls have a maximum effective range against aerial targets of roughly 2,000 meters, while the Hellfires flew in from 11,000 meters away, leaving the Iranian gun crews spending their final seconds watching tracerless fire arrive from a direction they couldn't target. The second layer operated simultaneously and in near silence. While the helicopters worked the outer ring, Cole's AN/SLQ 32V3 electronic warfare suite came alive in active mode, and the SLQ-32 is not Cold War-era noise jamming, where you broadcast enough static to drown a signal, but a precision instrument that identifies the specific active radar frequencies the Nasr 1 uses during terminal homing and injects spoofing signals that shift the apparent position of the ship. From the missile seeker's perspective, the Cole begins moving sideways much faster than any 9,000-ton destroyer can physically move, and 3 Nasr 1 missiles launched from boats that hadn't yet been destroyed flew toward a ghost, striking nothing as $600,000 worth of Iranian ordnance hit the Gulf of Oman and sank. The third layer was the loudest thing in the strait that morning. At 4 nautical miles, the distance at which the surviving Zolfaghar boats would begin their final attack, runs Cole's 2 Mark 38 Mod 2 gun systems opened fire simultaneously. The Mk-38 Mod 2 mounts a 25mm M242 Bushmaster automatic cannon on a remote-controlled stabilized platform with no gunner exposed on the weather deck, just an operator seated inside the ship behind steel, tracking targets on a high-definition monitor and pressing a trigger that delivers 200 rounds per minute per mount. At engagement range, a 2-second burst puts 13 rounds into a target area the size of a car door, and 52-knot fiberglass hulls do not survive that arithmetic. 7 more boats were reduced to debris and flame. Their Nasr 1 missiles, still in their launch tubes, cooking off in sequence as the boats burned, secondary explosions walking across the surface of the water like a lit fuse. The surviving boat commander's communications logs, recovered by intelligence assets after the engagement, show a gap of nearly 90 seconds. No transmissions, no orders, no acknowledgement from Shore Command, because the plan had assumed the Americans would be reacting, and instead the Americans had been ready before the first boat cleared its launch slip with no fallback doctrine. For that scenario, by 11:47, the Ashura-class intercept boats had reached their planned chaos range of 500 meters from Cole's hull. These were the boats the IRGC had sent specifically to confuse and distract fast enough at 90 knots to close the final mile in 40 seconds and small enough to create engagement geometry problems for larger weapon systems, with the theory being sound. Against a destroyer without close-in defenses, 6 boats at 90 knots closing to ramming distance would be genuinely dangerous. The Mk-15 Phalanx close-in weapon system exists precisely for this scenario. Its AN-VPS-2 tracking radar locks a surface or aerial contact in milliseconds. Its M168 20mm Vulcan rotary cannon fires 4,500 rounds per minute, and while sailors call it R2D2 because at rest, it looks like the Star Wars robot. Under fire, it creates a geometrically precise wall of tungsten that a moving object either passes through or ceases to exist in front of. The engagement time for a 90-knot surface target at 500 meters is approximately 3 seconds per boat, and all 6 Ashura-class craft were engaged within 11 seconds of entering effective range without a single command from the crew. The system saw them, it fired, and the math resolved. At 11:52, the Strait of Hormuz returned to its normal condition of heavy tanker traffic, fishing boats, and the background hum of 20% of the world's oil supply moving through an extremely small piece of water. Of the 24 Iranian fast attack craft that launched, not one reached effective missile range of the USS Cole, and not one Nasser, one warhead detonated against American steel. The destroyer never changed course, never reduced speed, continued north through the strait, logged the engagement, and served dinner at normal hour. What the Cole's crew also brought home, beyond an intact hull and a full magazine, was an intelligence haul worth more than the engagement itself. Every radar emission from every Zolfaghar boat cataloged, every IRGC communication frequency logged, every tactical maneuver analyzed for doctrine indicators. The Iranians thought they were running an attack. The Americans were simultaneously running a collection operation, and the two weren't even close to the same level of sophistication. The cost analysis is the part Iranian defense planners would prefer to bury. Iranian expenditures included 18 Zolfaghar-class fast attack craft at an estimated $1.1 million each, totaling $19.8 million. 6 Ashura-class intercept boats at approximately $180,000 each, totaling $1.08 million. And 34 Nasr, 1 anti-ship missiles at roughly $200,000 each, totaling $6.8 million, with 78 IRGC sailors killed, and a total Iranian investment of approximately $27.7 million for a strategic result of 0 nautical miles of the strait controlled, 0 ships sunk, 0 policy concessions extracted, and 0 reduction in American transit frequency. American expenditures came to 16 AGM, 114 Hellfire missiles at $117,000 each, totaling $1.87 million, Mk-38 ammunition of approximately 3,400 rounds at $65 per round, totaling $221,000, Phalanx ammunition of approximately 5,000 rounds at $30 per round, totaling $150,000, and SLQ-32 spoofing powered by electricity for a total American cost of approximately $2.24 million. With every platform that fired the helicopters, the destroyer, the sensors, returning home and ready to do it again by morning. The strategic damage runs deeper than the financial math suggests, because Iran spent 40 years developing its swarm doctrine, purchasing and building over 1,500 fast attack craft, training crews, and running exercises in the strait until the tactics were muscle memory. The entire intellectual and material capital of 4 decades of asymmetric Persian Gulf warfare made contact with layered American defenses and dissolved in 14 minutes. And the doctrine didn't just fail, it failed so completely and with enough observable detail for every regional naval intelligence service to analyze that the failure itself became the deterrent. Every navy that has ever quietly wondered whether a swarm of cheap, fast boats could overwhelm an Arleigh Burke now has the answer written in satellite imagery and SIGINT recordings, because the math was always wrong. Quantity doesn't overcome the sensor range gap between a Zolfaghar's radar and the AN-APS. 153 on a Romeo helicopter circling at 11,000 meters. Numbers don't neutralize. Hellfire missiles arriving from altitudes DS-CHAM guns were never designed to reach. And dispersion doesn't survive phalanx kinematic solutions applied at 4,500 rounds per minute. Every tactical advantage the IRGC swarm doctrine was built around had already been wargamed, countered, and built into the layered defense that was waiting for them before they left their island shelters that morning. And that demonstration has a value. The cost analysis can't fully capture, measured in the conversations that stopped happening in naval planning offices from Beijing to Moscow to Pyongyang about whether a swarm of cheap, fast boats could overwhelm an Arleigh Burke in littoral waters. Conversations that now have a definitive answer. 14 minutes and $2.24 million. Iran sent an armada built on 40 years of planning, and America sent a destroyer that had homework to grade. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe and share this video. The engagements that never make the evening news are the ones that define how the next war starts or doesn't.